Hello everyone, in today's video we're going to continue our series on the PMDG Douglas DC-6. We're going to go ahead and do takeoff as well as cruise, and then finally we're going to do some descent as well as some landing, but we'll save that for another video. Our previous video went through how to get this thing started. It is quite the project, as you've probably seen. We'll be making pretty serious use of our AFE here, that's our automatic flight engineer, because he does such a good job at kind of dealing with a lot of the problems you're going to run into. Alright, let's go ahead and get started. So first things first, everything's been started, the engines have been warmed up, everything's been run up, everything's been checked. We are good to go. Go pop up here real quick. I'm going to go ahead and double check our flight plan. We are using the GPS today to make things a little bit simpler for us. So I'm taking a look, looks pretty good right there. I'm going to make sure our CDI is switched to GPS mode, which it shows. And it's always a good idea to go ahead and find out what the actual MSG is. Apparently we have no MSG, which is sort of a shame, but it does say desired track is 125, so we're going to come over here and we're actually going to dial this in to 125 just to make our lives a little bit more sane here. And again, this gives us a nice initial takeoff heading. The runway today for takeoff is going to be runway 6, which is right over here on the left to make our lives nice and simple. So we're going to go ahead and get rumbling on the ground here, and we're going to tell this guy to go ahead and get our before takeoff checks started.
Boost pumps on low. Fuel selector and crossfeed. Main tanks and crossfeed off. Autopilot and carb heat. Off and cold. Hydraulic system. Down, forward, pressure and quantity checked. Okay. Flaps 20. Flaps set 20. Windows and turbine. Closed and on. Controls. Gust lock released. Free. Detonator. On. Mixture and cowl flaps. Reach unlocked. Set. Transponder. On. Landing lights. Extended and on. Before takeoff checks complete.
All right, that's all taken care of. This aircraft is ready to roll here. Give everybody one last little wiper to make sure everything is behaving the way we expect to, and then we'll kind of sneak our way onto the runway. Now, this aircraft is pretty straightforward as far as takeoff goes. So the most difficult part that you're going to be dealing with is going to be the energy management. Once we do get this thing airborne, it's basically an overweight Cessna. A lot of the controls are going to be very slow, very, very delayed. You're not going to feel anything too crazy. But the good news is it's actually pretty easy to control. And one of the things you're going to watch out for is as you do climb, don't be surprised if you have some issues as far as finding yourself on the correct pitch, especially when you're in instrument conditions like this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to slowly bring ourselves up onto the runway. Go ahead and hold down the brakes here. And I'm going to let the AFE do what he does best as far as takeoff goes. Come on down here. I'm going to go ahead and say we'll do a wet takeoff today so we get maximum power.
On. 30 inches.
Now the throttles are completely under his control at this point.
Stabilized. Cowl flaps. Cowl flaps. Cowl flaps set. Full power, please. Going full power.
Now, this isn't a B-36, so we can start rolling at 40 inches here. Now, one of my best friends was saying the fact that on the DC-6, you can actually legally take off with only 3 engines, assuming your weight is light enough. Well, looks like we got ourselves a pretty significant crosswind there. I'm going to go ahead and take my ailerons and tip them in that way. Just going to make takeoff a little more fun for us. Now, the interesting thing is watch what the rain does as we start accelerating down the runway here. It starts to does this little tiny dance here. It's kind of fun to watch. Controls are becoming effective. There's 90 knots, 100 knots, and we're going to slowly, gently lift up on the controls, and the plane's going to come up nice and neatly on its own. Again, nothing too crazy, no insanity here.
Gear selected up.
Now, this aircraft with the landing gear out is slow. So as soon as it gets that landing gear up, the aircraft's drag is going to come down significantly, making it much easier for us. actually have to kind of concentrate here. This weather's not exactly polite. So what we're trying to do is get fast enough so that the flight engineer goes ahead and slaps up the flaps.
Flaps up. Flaps going up.
So I'm going to hold it right about here for now. As soon as those flaps come up, the plane will start accelerating very rapidly. All right, we're going to keep our banking very gently at first. There we are.
METO power.
And now he's going to set METO power, which is simply maximum accepted takeoff. And we're going to establish 160 knots. Don't need to bank so much.
METO power set. Climb power. Setting climb power.
All right, now he's going to establish climb power once we get to 160 knots, which we've already passed. Remember, this is a big aileron, so you're going to need a big right foot in order to correct for it. When you do make this aircraft turning, though, it's going to have a tendency to overturn on you, so be kind of watching out for that. All right, going to go ahead and give myself a little bit of upward trim here. Not quite that much.
Climb power set. Have to take off checklist, please.
We have ourselves just about established on our course. All right, bring that nose back. A little bit of left foot there.
Checks complete.
And we are good to go. So obviously visibility is not great today, which makes this flight extra exciting. So I'm going to come down here and get the autopilot set up. We're going to click that switch first. We're going to come down here and now click this switch. That's going to automatically engage the autopilot. I'm now going to come down here and I'm going to click this button once to the right, which is going to go ahead and activate the CDI, which is going to cause us to make sure we're actually following our course. So we're doing a localizer hold, if you prefer. In this case, it would be navigational hold. Our cruise altitude today is going to be 7,000 feet. Oh my, this is, visibility. So we're hovering about 160 knots, which is good, but we're slowing down fast. So I'm actually going to come down to this wheel real quickly and just give it a couple taps forward, just to try to arrest that change of speed there. On a bad day, this thing climbs at about 550 feet per minute. Now, you'll know those bad days, or those will be the ones when you try to fly with a full load of everything. All right, nose is coming up a little bit, which is what we want. Again, it's not the world's most sophisticated autopilot, but it does work. It does do an ILS approach, which we'll do, like I said, at the very end here. There we go. You can see my speed is right around 160. Keep the 160 all the way up into space if you need to, but don't forget when you get to 14,000 feet, you are going to have to switch which blower you're going to be activating on. That's simply just supercharger control, but it's something we'll deal with on a very, very other day. Let's go ahead and take a look at our course today. It's relatively straightforward. Go ahead and I'll bring this one over to this way. Nice to have a built-in GPS. You can disable it if you choose to do so. All right, you can see we're making our way over to Jewett first, which is going to be basically our initial little point there before we start making our descent here. We're only going to go up to 7,000 feet today. There's simply no reason to go any higher than that because our flight is so darn short. You can drag this thing all the way up to 25,000, but again, that's completely on the fact that you can have enough time to get to that altitude, especially when you're climbing at like 500 feet per minute. Gotta love this rain effect here. That's pretty amazing. One thing we want to watch out for, though, is icing, even though it's the middle of the summer. And you can see I've got about 10 degrees temperature there, so I'm not worried about it too much. Climb speed is basically perfect. Climb angle is basically perfect. I'll give it one quick little tap. We are perfectly on course. Hey, I don't say the word perfect that often. And we are just about to 5,500 feet. Now, you'll notice my climb rate here is about 1,250 feet per minute. This is amazing. You will never get a climb speed this fast if you carry lots of stuff on board, which is kind of fun because when you go to land it when you're really, really heavy, it's a different experience than if you're very light. Now, you're probably wondering why I shut off my windshield wipers. Windshield wipers are for when you park, not for when you're accelerating. And you can see that is not the most pleasant visibility. But again, that's my fault for actually trying to fly during typical summer weather here. Everybody thinks of summer weather as, oh, sunshine. Yeah, we get some sunshine. And then you get 2 weeks of this, basically straight. And then it tends to get hot, and then it tends to get muggy. And the whole experience is a wee bit on the uncomfortable point. Speaking of uncomfortable, let's see how our temperatures are going. So right now, it looks like our cylinder head temperatures are fine. They're well within the bottom of the green here. Coming over to water pressure is fine. We don't need to worry about this too much. Carburetor air temperature is warm. Remember, this guy, actually this guy right here, is taking care of this for us. I'm not going to go paddling to them because I don't have a separate axis on my joystick for it. Otherwise, I have no problem playing with those. Coming back up here, all the B maps all look perfect. Our fuel flow, don't worry about that split in the needle. That's actually an illusion. That's not actually true. It's just part of the quirk of this aircraft, so don't worry. You're not burning more fuel in one engine than you are in the other. There's nothing wrong with your engines. Of course, if you've broken one of the engines, yeah, there's something wrong. in which case you're going to have to worry about that instead. Oil temps are looking good, oil pressures are looking good, fuel pressures are looking good, temperatures down here good. If you want to kind of get a visual view on that, we can go over to our engine stress, and you can see the only thing we have to worry about right now is oil temperature, which, again, is still pretty warm outside, and again, by oil temperature, it's just a little warm, it's nothing bad. All right, we're crossing 7,000 feet here. We were supposed to level off at 7,000, my fault for talking. We'll go ahead and stop at 7,500. And that should do it. I was really hoping we'd break out of this. That's why I kept climbing, but it wasn't going to happen. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to ask this chap over here to go ahead and select our cruise settings. So I'm going to go over to here. I'm going to go over to where the cruise button is. I'm just going to go click, and it's going to go activate his cruise autopilots. So what he's going to do now is he's going to reduce the RPM, he's going to reduce the manifold pressure, but the one thing he will not do is he won't take care of our fuel system. Now the fuel system on this aircraft is different. It's not nearly as intimidating as a lot of people think that it is. Let's go ahead and take a quick look here. Basically what you have is each tank, whoop, I didn't mean to grab that. You can if you need to. Each one of these tanks has two different settings on it. You have your main tank, actually three different settings. You have the main tank, you have an alternate tank, and then you have a cross-feed manifold. The way this simply works is if I want to use the alternate tank, I just click it. I've got no fuel in there, so I'm not going to do that. Now what makes this so cool is you also have this switch here, which gives you the ability to actually cross-feed specific engines. Now for example, if I wanted to grab these two selectors, I could actually shut these off and then set this cross-feed so that engines 1 or 2 are linked together and engines 3 and 4 are linked together. Notice nothing bad. Ooh, don't want to do that. Grab this one over here. Do the right-hand crossfeed. We'll go ahead and set that to the middle position. And now we can actually shut these engines off. Now I know you're going, you can't do that. Well, it's because now these engines are drawing fuel out of the crossfeed. And as you can see, it has no ill effect on anything on board. So go ahead and switch them back to their tanks on there, and I can set it back to this mode. This also gives you the unique ability, of course, if you want to run the entire airplane off one tank. What you would do is you take these two switches, pull them all the way back, and then select all these back except for the fuel tank that you have turned on. I'm not going to do that because that's going to mess up my balance later on when I go to land this thing. But note that that's pretty much all there is to this system. It's not nearly as complicated as people make it out to be. All right, I notice my engine temperatures are a little bit varied, which doesn't surprise me. The outside two engines are running a little warm. Does not surprise me. One thing I was worried about was ice, but I'm not seeing any accumulation, so I'm not going to panic on that too much. So we need to now go ahead and start thinking about descending the airplane, because we're getting pretty darn close to our destination here. If I actually zoom out just a teeny tiny bit, you can see basically we're going to go from Jewett to Lafay, and we need to be at an altitude of 3,500 when we get to Lafay. So I'm going to go ahead and talk to AFE, and I'm going to tell him to gently descend the airplane.
Setting 26 inches.
Now, one thing I did skip, and you're probably all panicking, is the pressurization settings on here. So first of all, let's make this thing a little bit warmer. The pressurization settings is something that I wasn't going to worry about because we're at such low altitude, but basically what you would do here is you take this to define the altitude of the cabin, and then you use this one to go ahead and define the altitude of the flight. So for example, if my flight were going to be traveling at an altitude of, let's say, 10,000 feet, we dial this to the 10,000 feet position, and basically this would handle all your scheduling as far as your air pressure goes. Now notice my cabin pressure here can get really, really low on account of the fact that we're dealing with a cabin that it's basically at the altitude that we're at. So I can set it to 5, and you'll notice there's an extra little needle here, which I can't break off because of the fact that our cabin here is, we're such a low altitude. Go ahead and pull that back to 0. I'm not going to worry about it too much. Now, if you look around here, this is what I was hoping to see, which is a little bit of this nice puffiness between the layers of clouds. Unfortunately for us, we barely got through any of it, and you can see we're going to go right back into it in a second. What a shame. What a shame. All right, give myself a little bit more downwards. About 1,000 feet per minute's plenty. Now, the interesting thing here is you're probably going, wait, why did you leave your power up so high for the purpose of descent? Well, these engines don't like to be cooled off. So one of the things you have to be really careful about is not letting it get too hot or too cool. In this case, I can see everything's starting to run a bit cool. So I can actually come up here to my cow flaps, and I can set these to -2 to actually crunch them down to try to warm them up as I descend. Like right now, I'm getting into the danger zone here. I actually have to close this even more aggressively. And now the engines are going to be able to retain a little bit more of that heat during that descent. Now, if I just cut the throttle and push the nose over, yeah, we get down in a hurry, but you'd also run the risk of doing some pretty serious damage here. Give it a couple taps of nose down. Again, we're good to about 260 knots before anything bad happens, and we're barely doing 200. We got a lot of drag. It's not that big a deal. All right. Setting our approach here. We're going to be hitting Jewett in just a moment. Then we're going to spin around, hit LaFay, hit User, Kent, and then we're going to go ahead and put this thing down on the ground. But like I said, I'll do final approach on a separate video. All right. Ooh, look at this. It's like flying in a crazy, insane world filled with marshmallows. That's kind of a fun picture right there. What an optical illusion. I feel like I'm going down into it, which essentially I am, but still it just doesn't feel right. And get ready for the rain. Ooh, this isn't a rain cloud. Lucky us, not Nimbus. All right, what else we got? So engines are warming back up, which is exactly what we wanted them to do. We want them to get too cold. Altitude's coming down. Like I said, we got to stop at about 3,500. And then we'll start thinking about approaching with this. Like I said, a very, very short flight today. Checking over everything real quickly. Engine stress. You can see even the engines are a little cold. The oil pressure's still a little high. Again, you're going to be going to war with these. That's one of the problems with radial engines, is you have to actually worry about them. All right, we're getting just about down to 3,000 feet, and now we can start thinking about getting ready for our approach here. So this approach is going to require us actually to go all the way down to 2,100 feet, which is perfectly fine. But for now, I'm going to go ahead and click this switch and go ahead and hold that altitude once we get down to it. This is a pretty flat area, so I'm not worried too much about C-fit, but obviously C-sharp or C-fit kind of a thing. Now that we've dialed that in, there's a couple different things we could do here. If we go over to our AFE real fast, we could, of course, ask him to go ahead and do in-range. Keep in mind, at in-range mode, basically, he's going to hold off the engine himself, and once we click on before landing, it becomes our airplane, which means we're actually going to have to put this thing down on the ground safely.
Fuel booster pumps. On low. Fuel tank selectors. Mains on, crossfeed off. Hydraulic bypass valve. Down. No smoking signs. On. In-range checks complete.
Oh man, this is intense. I've not seen anything except for when we popped out that cloud a little while ago, and we're actually able to kind of see where we're going. It looks like I might just get a break in a minute, but I doubt that I'll be able to get it for very long. So at this point now, we're basically, everything is ready to go. The aircraft is at the correct temperatures. I'm just double checking everything now. Yeah, we're probably a little cool, so we could probably check that out real fast. And that's all looking pretty good for now. If I see this needle start dipping downwards, I'll start getting a little nervous. The aircraft currently is basically lining itself up to put it down on the runway. The approach here is pretty straightforward. This is the ILS for runway 5. The one thing we do want to make sure we set up, and we'll talk about this next time, is making sure we're on the appropriate frequencies. We also want to double check to make sure our courses are set correctly and everything along those lines before we get there, but we'll be dealing with that next time. Enjoy.